Watch someone sleep and at first nothing happens. The chest rises and falls. The face goes slack. The body is still in the way. That only a sleeping body is still, a stillness with no effort in it. And then, maybe an hour in, something strange begins. Behind the closed lids, the eyes start to move. Not slowly, not the drifting roll of someone falling asleep, but quick, sharp, darting movements, left and right, up and down, as if the person were watching something happen. A tennis match. A bird. A face moving across a room. The eyelids stay shut. The room is dark. There is nothing to see. And yet, the eyes are moving exactly as they move when they are tracking something real, with the same precision, the same little corrective jumps that your eyes make right now as they cross this line. The body is asleep. The eyes are awake to something. The question is what? And the answer turns out to be one of the strangest and most beautiful facts about being a creature with a brain, because the thing those eyes are tracking does not exist anywhere in the physical world. It exists only as a pattern of electricity inside a skull, and the eyes are following it anyway, faithfully, as though it were the most real thing imaginable. Let me tell you how we even know to look for this, because the discovery itself is a good story about how science works. For most of human history, sleep was thought of as a single thing. You were awake, or you were asleep, and asleep meant off. The brain went quiet, the lights went down, and nothing much happened until morning. This seemed obvious. A sleeping person does nothing. They lie there. What could possibly be going on? And obvious things are dangerous in science because nobody bothers to check them. It took until 1953, in a sleep laboratory at the University of Chicago, for someone to actually check. A graduate student named Eugene Asarinsky was watching sleeping subjects, and he had a machine that recorded the movement of the eyes through small electrodes placed on the skin near the eyelids. The machine drew lines on a moving strip of paper, and in the middle of the night, the pen started swinging wildly, drawing big jagged strokes, as if the sleeper had snapped awake and was looking frantically around the room. Asarinsky went and checked. The subject was deeply, completely asleep. The eyes were moving, but the person was not awake. He thought the machine was broken. He checked the machine. The machine was fine. The eyes were really doing that. Now here is the part that matters about how to think. The easy thing, the comfortable thing, would have been to write it off. Machine glitch, muscle twitch, some meaningless artifact, nothing to see here. People do this constantly. They see something that does not fit, and they file it under noise and move on. Asarinsky and his advisor, Nathaniel Kleitman, did the opposite. They got curious. They said, in effect, that is peculiar. Let us find out what it is. And they started waking people up during these bursts of eye movement and asking them what was happening. And almost every time, the person said the same thing. I was dreaming. They could describe the dream. Vivid, visual, story-like dreams. The kind you remember. And when the researchers woke people during the quiet periods, when the eyes were still, the subjects mostly reported nothing, or vague thoughts, fragments, the dim gray static of a sleeping mind. The connection was unmistakable. The eye movements were the outward sign of dreaming. They named this state REM, for rapid eye movement, and in one stroke they had split sleep open. Sleep was not one thing. It was at least two completely different things, alternating all night long, and one of them was a state in which the brain was doing something extraordinarily active while the body lay perfectly still, and active is an understatement. When you put electrodes on the scalp and record the electrical activity of the brain during REM sleep, you do not see the slow, rolling, low-frequency waves of deep sleep. You see something that looks almost exactly like the waking brain. Fast, low, irregular, alive. If I showed you the brainwave trace of a person in REM sleep and the trace of a person wide awake and reading a book, you would have trouble telling them apart. The brain in a dream is burning fuel at nearly the same rate it burns while you are awake and thinking. By some measures, certain regions burn more. This is the great paradox at the center of the whole thing, and it is why REM sleep is sometimes called paradoxical sleep. The body looks shut down. The brain is roaring. There is a fire going on inside a house that appears, from the street, to be dark and empty. So now we have a deeper puzzle. If the brain is that active, why doesn't the body move? You have vivid dreams. You dream of running, of fighting, of falling, of swimming. Your motor cortex, the part of the brain that commands movement, is firing during these dreams. It is sending the signals. Run, reach, turn. Why don't you? Why don't sleeping people leap out of bed and act out their dreams every night? The answer is one of the most elegant safety systems in all of biology. During REM sleep, a small cluster of cells down in the brainstem switches on and actively paralyzes you. It sends a signal that travels down the spinal cord and releases chemicals that switch off the motor neurons, the cells that would otherwise carry the brain's commands to the muscles. The command to run is sent. It travels down. And just before it reaches the legs, it is blocked. Cut off at the last station. The brain is shouting move, and the body cannot hear it. This is called REM atonia. Atonia meaning loss of muscle tone. And it is the reason you can dream of sprinting across a field while lying motionless in your bed. You are, every single night, paralyzed on purpose. A locked-in pilot flying a plane that cannot leave the ground. And we know how important this system is, precisely because of what happens when it fails. There is a condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, in which the paralysis switch does not work properly. The brakes come off, and these people do exactly what you would predict. They act out their dreams. They punch, they kick, they leap from bed, they shout, they run into walls. Their dreaming brain sends the commands, and their body, no longer blocked, obeys. Bed partners get hurt. People injure themselves. It confirms what the paralysis is for. The motor commands in your dreams are real, fully formed instructions. The only thing standing between your dream and your bedroom wall is that little cluster of cells in the brainstem holding the body still, which tells you something profound about the dream itself. It is not a faint impression or a vague memory replaying. It is a full simulation, complete down to the level of motor commands, complete enough that if you let the body off its leash, it would carry the whole thing out. But here is the exception. And the exception is the whole point of everything that follows. The paralysis is nearly total. Nearly. Almost every voluntary muscle in your body is switched off during REM sleep. You cannot move your arms, your legs, your trunk, your hands. But a few muscles are spared. The muscles that keep you breathing, obviously, because you would die otherwise. The tiny muscles of the middle ear and the muscles that move your eyes. The eyes are exempt from the paralysis. While the rest of the body is locked down, frozen, cut off from the screaming motor cortex, the eyes are left free to move. And they do. They move in those quick darting bursts that gave the whole state its name. Now stop and think about how strange that is. Evolution went to enormous trouble to build a system that shuts down nearly every muscle you have to keep you safe while your brain runs its nightly fire. And then it deliberately left the eyes out of the lockdown. It carved an exception. That is not an accident. Nature does not leave an exception like that lying around for no reason. When you find a system that paralyzes everything except one specific thing, the one specific thing it spares is telling you what matters. The eyes were left free because the eyes have a job to do during the dream. The question is the one we started with. What are they looking at? Because there is nothing to look at. That is the thing you have to hold in your mind to feel the full weight of this. The eyelids are closed. Even if they were open, the room is dark, and in any case the visual system is busy generating its own pictures, not receiving them from outside. No light is coming in. No image is forming on the retina the way it does when you are awake and looking at the world. The optic nerve is not carrying a fresh picture of a room or a face or a landscape, and yet the eyes are moving as if they were tracking exactly those things. Moving with the speed and the pattern and the little corrective adjustments of an eye that is following a moving object through space. The hardware for looking is fully engaged. It is being driven hard by the brain. It is just not being driven by anything in the room. It is being driven by something else, something inside. Let me make the strangeness of this concrete, because I think people hear eyes move during dreams and nod and move on without realizing what they have just agreed to. Your eyes do not move randomly when you are awake. They are one of the most precisely controlled systems in your body. When you track a moving object, a bird across the sky, your eyes lock on and follow it smoothly, and your brain runs constant calculations to predict where the bird is going and keep the image steady on the most sensitive part of your retina. When you scan a scene, your eyes jump from point to point in quick movements called saccades, and each jump is aimed, computed, sent to a target. This is not loose machinery. This is a guided system that always moves towards something, that is always aiming at a location in space that the brain has decided is worth looking at. So when that same system fires during a dream, when the eyes make those same aimed, computed, targeted movements, the most natural reading is that the brain is doing the same thing it always does. It is aiming the eyes at something, a location, a point in a space. It is just that the space is not the bedroom. The space is the dream. And this is where the real scientific argument begins, because it is one thing to say the eyes are moving and another to prove what they are moving toward. Maybe the movements really are meaningful, the eyes scanning a dreamed-up scene the way they would scan a real one. Or maybe, and you have to take this seriously, the movements are just noise, just exhaust. The brainstem during REM sleep is firing off bursts of activity, throwing signals all over the place, and maybe the eye movements are simply the visible spillover of that storm, with no more meaning than the flicker of a fluorescent tube about to die. Both of these are real possibilities, and 100 years ago we would have had no way to decide between them. We would have just argued about it, each side telling a nice story. And stories are cheap. What changed? What makes this one of the most satisfying detective stories in modern neuroscience is that we found ways to actually look, to get inside the dreaming brain and ask it directly what those eyes are doing and why. And the answer, when it finally came, was stranger and more beautiful than either of the old stories. That is where we go next. The evidence that the eyes are tracking a world that has no existence outside the firing of cells, and the astonishing experiments that let dreamers reach across the wall of sleep and tell us, in real time, where they were looking. So we have two stories, and they cannot both be fully right. One says the darting eyes of a dreamer are tracking a scene, aiming themselves at the people and objects and movements inside the dream, the way your eyes aim at the real world when you are awake. The other says the eye movements are just noise, the random discharge of an overexcited brainstem, signifying nothing. And the trouble with settling this, the trouble that held the question hostage for decades, is that a dream is the most private thing in the universe. Nobody can climb inside it. You cannot point a camera at it. The only witness to a dream is the dreamer, and the dreamer is asleep and cannot speak, and by the time they wake the dream is already dissolving, already half rewritten by the act of remembering it. How do you do science on something that vanishes the moment you try to observe it and that only one person can ever see? This is the kind of problem that separates people who give up from people who get clever. And the people who worked on this got very clever indeed. The first approach was the obvious one, and it is worth understanding why the obvious one is not good enough. You wake the dreamer up, right after a burst of eye movements, and you ask them what they were dreaming, and you compare what they say to the direction the eyes were pointing. In the early days, in the 1960s, a researcher named William Dement, who became one of the giants of sleep science, tried exactly this, and there were tantalizing hits. He reported a sleeper whose eyes had been moving in a steady left-right pattern, and who woke and said they had been watching two people throwing a ball back and forth. He reported a sleeper whose eyes ran up and down, and who woke and described climbing a series of ladders, looking up and down the rungs. When you read these cases, they feel like a smoking gun. The eyes went side to side, the dream was side to side. The eyes went up and down, the dream went up and down. The scanning story looks proven. But you have to be honest, and being honest is the hardest and most important part of this whole business. A handful of good-looking cases is not proof. Here is the problem. The person doing the matching often already knows which way the eyes moved. They are looking for a connection, and a brain that is looking for a connection is frighteningly good at finding one, whether or not it is really there. The dream report is vague and rambling, full of motion in every direction, and out of all that material it is easy to pull out the one detail that matches the eye trace and quietly ignore the rest. And dreams have movement going every which way all the time, so just by chance some of it will line up with the eyes. This is not a small worry. This is the worry that kills more bad science than any other, the human talent for seeing the pattern you went in expecting to see. So the early eye direction studies, exciting as they were, left the question genuinely open for years. Some researchers got correlations. Others ran the experiment carefully, with people who did not know the eye directions doing the matching, and the correlations got weaker or fell apart. The honest summary, for a long time, was that we did not know. The eyes might be scanning the dream, or we might be fooling ourselves, and you could not tell which from the outside. What broke the deadlock was a discovery so odd that when it was first proposed, serious scientists thought it was nonsense. It turns out that some people, while fully asleep and fully dreaming, can become aware that they are dreaming. The dream keeps running, but a part of the mind wakes up inside it and knows, this is a dream. These are called lucid dreams, and for most of scientific history they were dismissed as a fantasy, a contradiction in terms. How can you be asleep and know it? If you know it, surely you are awake. But here is the thing nobody had put together. We just said that during REM sleep the body is paralyzed except for a few muscles, and one of those muscles, the one set of muscles you can still move, is the eyes. So, in the early 1980s, a researcher named Stephen LaBerge at Stanford realized something that should give you a chill when you understand it. If a person can become consciously aware inside a dream, and if the eyes are the one part of the body that is not paralyzed, then a lucid dreamer could move their eyes on purpose, in a pattern agreed on in advance, and send a message out of the dream and into the laboratory. A signal from inside a sleeping, dreaming brain to the waking world. A knock on the wall from the other side of sleep. And it worked. LaBerge had trained lucid dreamers go to sleep wired up to the eye movement recorder, and they agreed beforehand on a code. When you become lucid, when you realize you are dreaming, move your eyes left, right, deliberately, in big sweeps. And the researchers watched the recorder, and they watched the brainwaves confirm the person was in REM sleep, genuinely asleep, genuinely dreaming, and then across the paper came the signal. Left, right, the exact, prearranged pattern, made on purpose by a person who was asleep from inside a dream to tell the people outside, I am here, I am dreaming, and I know it. I find this almost unbearably wonderful. It is the closest thing we have to a telephone line into the dreaming mind. For the first time, the dreamer was no longer a silent, unreachable witness. They could report, in real time, while it was happening, by the one channel evolution had left open, the eyes. And this changed everything, because now you could do real experiments. You could ask a lucid dreamer to do a specific thing inside the dream and watch what their body did from the outside and match the two with the timing locked together, no waking up, no fading memory, no guessing. In one beautiful set of experiments, lucid dreamers were asked to signal when they became lucid, and then to do something inside the dream, like look back and forth between 2 points, or trace a shape, and the eye movements recorded in the lab matched what they were doing in the dream. When a dreamer dreamed of looking from one side to the other, the eyes in the bed moved from one side to the other. The link between the eyes and the dreamed gaze, which the early studies could only hint at and could never nail down because of the human tendency to see what you expect, was now demonstrated cleanly because the dreamer was deciding the gaze on purpose and reporting it through the same eyes that the camera was watching. The eyes are not moving randomly. They are pointing where the dreaming mind is looking. The scanning story, the one that sounded almost too poetic to be true, turned out to be substantially true. When you move your eyes in a dream, your real eyes move with them. But I have saved the best for last, because the lucid dreaming experiments tell you about deliberate, conscious gaze, and most dreaming is not deliberate or conscious. Most of the time the dreamer is not lucid. The dream just unfolds, and the eyes dart along with it, and we want to know whether those ordinary, automatic, non-lucid eye movements are also tracking the dreamed scene. And to answer that, you need to get even deeper. You need to get past the dream report, past even the conscious dreamer, all the way down to the individual cells. In the last decade, neuroscientists found a way. Some people, for medical reasons, usually to find the source of severe epileptic seizures, have fine electrodes implanted deep inside their brains. Electrodes so precise they can record the firing of single neurons. And some of these patients agreed to be recorded while they slept. Now, deep in a region of the brain called the medial temporal lobe, there are neurons that do a remarkable thing when you are awake. They respond to specific things you are looking at. There is, famously, a kind of cell that fires when you see a particular person or a particular place, a cell that lights up for one face and stays quiet for others. These are the cells that help your brain answer the question, what am I looking at right now? They fire when your gaze lands on something and your brain recognizes the scene in front of you. So the researchers recorded these cells during REM sleep, and they watched what happened around the moments when the sleeper's eyes made one of those sudden darting movements. And what they found is the deepest answer we have. At the instant the eyes moved in the dream, these neurons fired in just the way they fire when a waking person's eyes jump to a new object and the brain takes in a new scene. The eye movement and the burst of recognition cells went together, locked in time, exactly as they do when you are awake, and you flick your eyes to a new face across a room, and your brain registers, there, that, a new thing in view. The sleeping brain was behaving at the level of individual cells, as if each eye movement was a glance at something new in the dream world, as if the dreamer flicked their eyes and a new piece of the dream swung into view and the brain went, there it is. The eyes are not exhaust. They are not noise. They are doing in the dream precisely what they do in waking life. They are reorienting the gaze to a new part of a scene, and the brain is responding by bringing that part of the scene into focus. Except the scene is not made of light landing on the retina. The scene is made entirely of the brain's own electrical activity, a world conjured from the inside, and the eyes are scanning across it as faithfully as they would scan a sunlit street. Sit with that, because it is one of the strangest facts about you. There is, every night, a world inside your head, with places and faces and movement and depth, a world detailed enough and stable enough that your eyes move across it the way they move across a real room, jumping from point to point, tracking what moves, settling on what holds still, and your recognition neurons fire to greet each new thing your gaze lands on. And none of it is out there. There is no room, no street, no face. There is a skull, and inside it 1.5 kilos of tissue, and patterns of electricity running through that tissue, and somehow those patterns add up to a place vivid enough to look around in. The eyes were left unparalyzed so they could do this, so they could explore a world made of nothing but the firing of cells. The question we have been circling now sharpens to its real form. Not just what are the eyes tracking, but why? Why would a brain, asleep, cut off from the world, with the body shut down for safety, go to the enormous trouble of building a world and then sending the eyes out to explore it? What is the looking for? That is the deepest part of the story, and that is where we go last. So we are left with the deepest question of all, and it is the kind of question that physics taught me to ask, which is not what is happening, but why would a system be built this way? Because anything that costs this much has to be paying for something, and dreaming is expensive. Think about what the brain is doing every night during REM sleep. It is burning fuel at nearly the rate of full wakefulness. It is running an elaborate safety system to paralyze the body so the dream cannot hurt you. It is leaving the eyes free, on purpose, so they can scan a world it has gone to the trouble of building out of its own electricity. This is not the behavior of an organ that has switched off for the night. This is the behavior of an organ doing serious work, work important enough that evolution kept it, refined it, and protected it across hundreds of millions of years, in nearly every mammal, in birds, maybe further down still. When you find a costly thing that has been conserved that long, you are not looking at an accident. You are looking at something a creature cannot afford to do without. The eyes move because the brain is running a simulation, and the simulation matters. The only question left is what it is for. And here the honest thing to say, before I tell you the best answers we have, is that nobody knows for certain. This is the live edge of the science, and anyone who tells you they have the final answer to why we dream is selling something. But we are not in the dark either. We have real evidence, real pieces of the picture, and they point in a direction that is, I think, more interesting than any of the old guesses. Let me walk you through the pieces, because each one tells you something, and together they sketch a creature whose mind never really stops working on the problem of being alive. Start with memory, because this is the piece we are most sure of. When you learn something during the day, when you practice a skill, or walk a new route, or have an experience worth keeping, that information does not get filed away permanently in the moment. It is held first in a fast, temporary form, fragile, easily lost. And then, during sleep, the brain does something remarkable. It replays the experience. We can see this directly in animals. Record from the cells in a rat's brain that fire when it runs through a maze, the cells that map where it is in space, and you find that each location lights up a particular pattern of cells as the rat moves through. Then let the rat sleep, and record again. And you see the very same patterns fire again, in the same order, the path through the maze running itself again in the sleeping brain, sometimes sped up, played back like a tape. The brain is rehearsing the day, and during this replay, the fragile temporary memory is gradually copied into a more durable form, woven into the long-term structure of the brain, strengthened where it matters and trimmed where it does not. This is part of what sleep is for. It is when the day gets sorted, consolidated, written down for keeping. And the dream, the vivid story you experience, may be in part what it feels like from the inside to have your brain replaying and reweaving the threads of your life. The eyes, scanning the dream scene, may be moving across reconstructed fragments of places you have actually been, faces you have actually seen, pulled up and run through again so they can be kept. But it is more than a tape recorder, and this is where it gets beautiful. The dream does not just replay the day exactly as it happened. It recombines. It takes a face from one place and puts it in another. It blends two rooms into a room that never existed. It runs scenarios that did not happen but could. And this points to a second job, which is not about remembering the past but about preparing for the future. A brain that can build a world out of its own activity is a brain that can run experiments. It can ask, what would happen if? It can rehearse a confrontation, practice a fear, walk through a danger, all in total safety, with the body locked down so nothing can go wrong. There is a real idea in the science, with real evidence behind it, that part of what dreams do is let the brain practice dealing with threats. Notice how often dreams are anxious, how often you are being chased, or falling, or unprepared, or in danger. That is not a malfunction. That may be the brain doing what a flight simulator does for a pilot, running you through the emergencies again and again, in a place where crashing costs nothing, so that the circuits that handle fear and escape and quick decision are tuned and ready before you ever need them for real. The eyes track the threat across the dreamed scene because the brain is rehearsing the act of watching for danger, the most ancient and important thing a pair of eyes ever did. Now layer on a third piece, which is about emotion. A dream is not just pictures, it is feeling. Dreams are drenched in emotion, often more intense than waking life. And it turns out the chemistry of the dreaming brain is unusual in a way that matters. During REM sleep, the brain shuts down its supply of certain stress-related chemicals, particularly one called noradrenaline, the chemical of alarm and vigilance. So you have this strange and specific situation. The emotional centers of the brain are highly active, lighting up, running hard. The memories of the day, including the difficult ones, are being replayed. But the stress chemical that normally accompanies fear and distress is switched off, and there is a powerful idea, supported by a growing body of work, that this is the brain doing emotional repair. It is taking the hard experiences, the frightening or painful or upsetting things, and replaying them in a safe chemical environment, stripped of the stress signal, so that over time the memory can be kept while the raw sting of it is worn down. You wake and you still remember what happened, but it hurts a little less. The dream has, in a sense, processed the pain overnight. This may be why a wound to the heart so often feels more bearable after sleep, why time and sleep together heal what neither does alone. And when this system breaks, when people cannot do this nightly processing, the evidence suggests they suffer for it, the difficult memories staying raw and intrusive instead of softening. The eyes, scanning the dream, may be scanning across the emotional residue of a life, the scenes that need another pass, another night of quiet repair. But now I want to show you the piece of evidence that, to me, is the most astonishing of all, the one that cracks the whole question open and forces you to think about dreaming completely differently. We have been talking as if the eyes move in dreams to track scenes built from memory, from things you have seen and places you have been. So here is a question that should stop you cold. What about a creature that has never seen anything at all? A fetus, in the dark, in the womb, with eyes that have never received a single ray of light. Does it have REM sleep? Does it dream? And the answer is yes. Not only yes, but more than you do. A fetus in the last months before birth, and a newborn baby, spends enormous amounts of time in REM sleep, far more than an adult. A newborn spends about half of all its sleep in REM, and a premature infant even more. The eyes are darting behind the lids, the brain is running its storm of activity in a being that has never seen a face, never tracked a bird, never looked at a room, never had a single visual experience to remember or replay. So whatever those eyes are tracking, it cannot only be a recording of the past, because there is no past to record. The visual system is firing, driving the eyes, building activity, in a brain that has nothing yet to build from. What on earth is it doing? And the answer, the best answer we have, is that it is building itself. This is the deepest function of all, the one underneath the others. The brain is not born finished. It has to wire itself up, has to connect billions of cells into working systems, has to tune the circuits for vision and movement and feeling. And it cannot wait for the outside world to do this, because some of these systems need to be working the moment they are needed. A newborn animal that cannot see well enough to find its mother does not survive. So the developing brain does something extraordinary. It generates its own activity from the inside to train itself before the real signals arrive. Deep in the developing visual system, waves of spontaneous activity sweep across the sheets of cells again and again, as if the brain were showing itself test patterns, rehearsing the act of seeing before there is anything to see. These waves help wire the visual system correctly, help the connections find their proper targets, help the whole apparatus of vision assemble itself in the dark. And the eye movements of the dreaming fetus may be part of this. The motor system and the visual system practicing together, the eyes and the brain rehearsing the choreography of looking over and over, so that on the day the baby opens its eyes to actual light, the machinery is already built, already tuned, already ready to track a face. The dream in the womb is the brain teaching itself to see before it has ever seen. And once you understand that, the whole story reorganizes itself around a single idea. Look at what these functions have in common. Building the visual system before birth, replaying and consolidating memories, recombining experiences to prepare for what might come, processing emotion in a safe chemical bath. Every one of these is the brain working on itself, from the inside, generating its own activity to maintain and improve and protect the most complicated object in the known universe. The waking brain is busy dealing with the world, taking in what is out there and responding to it, with no spare capacity for the deep internal housekeeping. So that work waits for the dark. It waits until the senses are quieted and the body is safely locked down, and then the brain turns inward and runs the simulation it could not afford to run while awake. And the eyes, free of the paralysis, are the part of the body that gets to come along, scanning the inner world the way they spend the day, scanning the outer one, because looking is so fundamental to what a brain does that it does not stop just because the lights are off. The eyes are tracking the products of the mind's own labor, the scenes it builds for memory and rehearsal and repair, and, in the very beginning, for the sheer act of constructing the capacity to see. So, let me bring you back to where we started, to the simple thing anyone can watch. A sleeping person, still and quiet, and behind the closed lids, the eyes beginning to move, quick and aimed, tracking something that is not in the room. You know now what that motion means. It means the body is paralyzed on purpose, all but the eyes and the breath, so that the brain can run its nightly fire without harm. It means the brain is as active as it is in waking life, building a world out of nothing but its own electricity. It means the eyes have been deliberately spared the lockdown so they can do the one thing they were made for, scanning a scene, settling on what matters, following what moves, and the recognition cells deep in the brain firing to greet each new thing the gaze lands on, exactly as they do in daylight, except there is no daylight, no scene, no room, only the firing of cells assembling a place vivid enough to look around in. And it means that this is not idle. The eyes are moving across the work of a brain, repairing the day's wounds, filing the day's memories, rehearsing the dangers it might meet, and, in a being not yet born, wiring up the very ability to see by practicing on a world it invents for the practice. The next time you watch someone sleep, or feel your own eyes drift and dart as you fall away into a dream, remember what is really happening. You are not switching off. Some of the most important work your brain ever does is the work it does when you appear to be doing nothing at all. You spend your days looking outward at a world made of light, and your eyes track it because tracking the world is how a creature stays alive. And then at night, when the light is gone and the body goes still, you turn the same eyes inward and track a world made of yourself, and you explore it, faithfully, scene by scene, because some part of you is genuinely there, genuinely looking, genuinely present in a place that exists nowhere but inside your own head. The movement of your eyes in the dark is the sign of it. It is the visible trace of a mind that never stops working on the problem of being you, that keeps building and repairing and rehearsing and looking, all night, every night, in a theater that only you will ever see. The eyes are moving because in the only world that matters at that moment, there is something to look at, and you built it, and you are there.